In the UK, Old Street in Liverpool has built a reputation for being a center for time-slip anomalies. Some have attributed this phenomenon to a circular ring of underground train tracks that perhaps produce a mysterious effect due to the large amount of electromagnetic activity. On one instance, in 1996, a police officer, Frank, was shopping nearby with his wife. They split up and were meant to meet at Dillon's bookshop on Bold Street. But as Frank crossed the Lyceum, a 19th century building that marks the start of the street, he was overwhelmed by a strange sensation. The entire street went dead quiet. He was then startled by a honking van that looked like it belonged in the 1950s, with the name Kaplan's on the side. Frank got out of the road and headed towards the bookshop, but instead of Dillon's over the entrance hung a sign that said Cripps, and instead of books, the windows displayed women's handbags and shoes. He then noticed others in the street allegedly dressed in clothes from the 40s and 50s, but when entering the shop, the shelves and window displays were lined with books. He later discovered that there was once a local business called Kaplan's, and the bookshop used to be a women's clothes shop called Cripps. These are a few of hundreds of similar stories told by people who swear they momentarily slipped through time. Are they hallucinations caused by random factors in the brain? Or is it possible under perfect circumstances to step into another time as if walking through a doorway? Deep in the Andes Mountains near Lima, Peru lies the Marcahuasi Stone Forest, an ancient site long seen as a hotbed of supernatural activity such as UFO sightings and strange visions. The massive rocks that surround the area are said to resemble human faces, animals, and religious symbols thought to have been created by ancient civilizations, though archaeologists say they were formed naturally. This reputation draws many travelers to the area who seek otherworldly experiences. One such case was reported by a doctor treating a patient who was removed from the area suffering from paralysis over half of her body. The patient who entered the area at night with friends was lured away from camp by strange music to a remote torchlit cabin. Through the windows, they could see people dancing, and according to the patient, quote, "I felt a sudden sensation of cold which I paid little attention to, and I stuck my head through an open door. It was then that I saw the occupants were clad in 17th century fashion. As she started to enter, one of her friends pulled her back out. The half of her body that passed the threshold of the door was the part that became paralyzed. The doctors could find no physical signs or causes for the paralysis, and eventually had to dismiss it as an unknown affliction. In 1935, English Air Marshal Sir Victor Goddard was making a routine flight from Andover, England to Edinburgh, Scotland. While over Scotland, the Air Marshal flew over an old abandoned airfield that he noticed looked particularly dilapidated, being overrun with local livestock. A few days later on his return flight, Goddard entered a thick storm, strong winds, and strange yellow clouds. Eventually the clouds broke, and just ahead was the airfield he saw a few days earlier, only now it was buzzing with activity. He noticed several planes painted bright yellow as well as a monoprop plane he couldn't recognize. The mechanics also were dressed in blue uniforms as opposed to the standard brown. When Goddard returned to base, friends he told laughed, knowing that the airfield had been abandoned for over 15 years. There was zero possibility that there were active servicemen and planes there at that time of his flight in 1935. 4 years later, at the outset of World War II, the airfield was renovated and reactivated as a training field. Trainee planes were painted yellow, and the mechanics' uniforms were switched to blue from brown, as well as a new monoprop plane, the Miles M14 Magister, being added to the roster. Goddard was from then on convinced he had slipped momentarily into the future. What other ways could sound waves be affecting us subtly or unconsciously in cities which are so full of countless uncontrolled man-made sounds? How common is it that high levels of stress and anxiety are actually a result of noise pollution? How much does this noise affect things like mental health and crime? A quick Google search on this topic will have you sprinting to buy some earplugs. Good luck, and remember, silence is golden. Extensive research has been conducted showing that varying frequencies and in different combinations can actually entrain the brain in different mood and focus states. Playing one frequency in one ear and another in the other ear will create an effect known as a binaural beat, an interference created entirely by your brain. To experience this effect, you must be using headphones. This tone plus this tone puts your brain in a sleepy or lethargic state. This tone plus this tone entrains a relaxed state. This tone plus this tone creates an alert state. You can experiment with these sounds using a binaural beats generator. These are from mynoise.net. Sound weapons or acoustic weapons are commonly used for crowd control and deterrence, and utilize a beam of ultrasound, sound frequencies higher than 20,000 Hz, directed at the target. Depending on the frequency and intensity, these sounds can disrupt or even totally destroy the eardrums of the target, or at a minimum cause nausea or discomfort. An LRAD or long-range acoustic device was used aboard the cruise ship Seabourn Spirit to keep pirates from boarding. At around 5:50 a.m., about 71 miles off the coast of Somalia, the ship and its 115 passengers were attacked by 2 pirate speedboats who fired machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades at the ship. Despite being struck by a piece of shrapnel, the ship's master-at-arms, Sam Bahadar Garung, successfully used the LRAD device to deter the pirates from boarding the ship. Sound has been suspected as a potential source of a mysterious and yet-to-be-explained illness known as
Havana syndrome.
Havana syndrome.
Havana syndrome.
which has suspiciously affected mostly U.S. government and military personnel while in foreign countries. Symptoms include hearing a sudden, loud noise, mild to severe pain and ringing in the ears, feelings of pressure or vibrations in the head, visual problems, nausea, as well as cognitive difficulties like being unable to focus or even think straight. Victims of these mysterious symptoms range in the thousands, with the U.S. Department of State officially classifying the incidents as, quote, unexplained health incidents. It's theorized that an unknown weapon is being operated by a hostile foreign power, which potentially could be using ultra-high or ultra-low frequency sound waves, undetectable by the human ear, but which affect the victim nonetheless. In the 1980s, Vic Tandy was working as a researcher at a medical manufacturing company when he repeatedly experienced sweating while cold, feeling depressed, and noticing ghostly apparitions in his purview, but when looking he could see no ghosts. This phenomenon continued, having Tandy question the existence of actual ghosts haunting the lab, until one day while cleaning his fencing sword, he noticed a slight vibration in the metal. Upon further experimentation, Tandy discovered his desk sat in a zone experiencing an extreme level of infrasound, sound waves lower than 20 Hz, below human perception. Infrasounds are emitted and used as communication by some animals, such as whales and elephants. In fact, at the right distance, sounds emitted by a sperm whale can vibrate a human being to death, reaching levels of 230 decibels, nearly twice as loud as a jet engine at close range. In Tandy's case, it turns out these sound waves were being emitted from a newly installed extractor fan. The extremely low frequency vibrations, while unable to hear, were actually rattling Tandy's eyes, causing nausea and the apparent effect of ghostly images in his periphery.
Spacecrafts could come in by the thousands.
Heaven's Gate was started by Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite in the 1970s. The core belief was that by rejecting their human nature, followers could transform themselves into immortal extraterrestrial beings, upon which a UFO would descend to take the followers to, quote, the next level of humanity. Sadly, this belief evolved into one in which the followers viewed their bodies as merely containers, and that graduating to the next level involved leaving their bodies in the form of taking their own lives. With this belief, in March of 1997, 39 members, dressed identically in black shirts, sweatpants, and Nike Decades, ceremonially took a poison cocktail and committed suicide, believing their souls would ascend to a UFO which was hiding behind the passing comet Hale-Bopp. Belief is a powerful force which can be used to unite people and to illuminate a path out of whatever darkness they suffer in life. But easily this belief can be twisted into dangerous fantasies. Do your own research, be safe, and remember that life is great. Without it, you'd be dead. Nation of Islam, founded in Detroit, Michigan by Wallace Fard Muhammad in 1930, believes in a spaceship known as the Mothership, which carries a city where Allah and his scientists live and monitor humanity. Small ships called baby planes are docked in the Mothership and occasionally visit Earth in the form of UFOs. These baby planes will carry the righteous to the Mothership while bombs are exploded on Earth, ending the reign of the old white-dominated order who they believe were created by an evil scientist thousands of years ago. Joy of Satan Ministries was founded in 2002 by Maxine Dietrich and claims to be a synthesis of theistic Satanism, Nazism, and Gnostic paganism. They believe that Satan and the demons are in fact sentient and powerful extraterrestrial beings responsible for the creation of humanity, and that Enki, the Sumerian god of creation, is Satan. They are anti-Semitic, believing that the alien known as Satan created the white race, and that an evil group of aliens known as the reptilians created the Jewish, Islamic, and Christian religions in order to program and control human beings. Scientology was created by author L. Ron Hubbard in the 1950s and teaches that humans are immortal beings called Thetans who have lived thousands of past lives. The story goes that billions of human beings were brought to Earth by a being called Xenu, who ruled a confederation of planets 70 million years ago, who then killed the humans with hydrogen bombs. After this, the Thetans stuck to the bodies of the living where they remain to this day. Universal medicine, or the way of the livingness, believes its founder Serge Benhayan is the reincarnation of Leonardo da Vinci, and that 9-foot-tall aliens are secretly going around sniffing human beings. Also that certain types of massage can heal illnesses, that carrots are as bad for you as heroin, and that drinking alcohol can cause evil spirits to escape your body, which then go around attacking your family. Ashtar Galactic Command is a religion started in the 50s whose members claim to channel the blonde-haired, blue-eyed extraterrestrial and interdimensional being known as Ashtar Sheeran. Advocate George Van Tassel claimed to be able to tap into the, quote, universal mind of God, where he could speak to Jesus, Ashtar, and Nikola Tesla, who transmitted instructions to build the Integratron, a machine to extend lifespan and access knowledge from the past and future. Believers train as members of the Ashtar Command, a galactic law enforcement agency preparing for an imminent rescue of humanity by a space fleet expected to arrive in the near future. Some experience moments of extreme synchronicity as evidence of a glitching simulation. Synchronicity is the simultaneous occurrence of events which appear significantly related but have no discernible causal connection. One almost impossible coincidence is the existence of a solar eclipse. The sun is 400 times wider than the moon, but also happens to be exactly 400 times farther away, making them appear exactly the same size. The odds of this are infinitesimally small, and yet eclipses occur. Are these glitches in fact a result of overall processing power of the computer our simulation is running out of capacity? As we create more people and even more realistic virtual simulations ourselves in the form of video games and AI, could we be straining the system? If our civilization one day creates a virtual reality indistinguishable in scale and detail from our own, could the system crash? And if the system did crash, would that be the end or the beginning? Have suggested the existence of our universe's physics point to the limitations of a simulated reality. For instance, in video games, only the part of the world that is seen is generated. To render the entire world all of the time would be far too costly on processing speed. Instead, only the slice visible to the player is rendered. Could this processing limitation explain the universal speed limit that is the speed of light? If we could travel faster than light to other galaxies, we might see that part of the universe is still rendering before our eyes like a lagging video game. Some point to the Mandela effect as evidence of glitching, when many people have memories of details or events that technically did not happen, as if history was altered, but a remnant of the old reality remains. Believers point to the widely held memory of news outlets reporting that South African leader Nelson Mandela had died in prison in the 80s, when in fact Mandela was released from prison in 1990 and died in 2013. Some people experience unexplained ellipses in time, as if several hours, days, sometimes weeks have passed in an instant. In one case, a Redditor shared an experience of it being just before bedtime as a kid. He was reading a particular page in a book, resting his weight on his elbows. In an instant, the sun had come out, he was on the same page in the same position, yet a whole night had passed in the blink of an eye. Others experience objects disappearing and randomly reappearing days or even years later. In one case, case, a young boy received an old coin from a random old man. The coin was special to him, so later, in his 20s, he bought a safe and kept the coin with other valuables locked away. One day he went to check on the items in the safe and discovered the coin had disappeared. It stayed lost for 2 years until one day in the attic of his childhood home. He was boxing up some items when he felt an object hit his shoulder. There was no ledge or anything something could have fallen from. It fell as if out of thin air, and it turned out to be the coin.